Hello, everybody. This is Pete from PA Labs. It's been suggested to me that if I use a darker theme in the PureBasic IDE, that it would come up better on the videos. So I'm giving that a shot. What I have done is come out here to Preferences and gone to Coloring. And if you notice this all the way at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of different schemas down here. So I used black style and then went in and changed a few of the settings to where it will be more uh, standing out on the black background, such as normal text was a darker blue, and I went with teal so it stands out. And module names, I went with yellow. So I mean, I've tweaked it up a little bit. That's why I don't get a name down here. So hopefully, as we get going at this, we will see a difference, and you guys will hopefully be able to see the screens better. So without further ado, I'm continuing on the Beginner's Corner videos, and the next thing I want to broach is how do you begin? How do you begin writing code? Well, uh, you can start just right in here and start hacking away at keys. But what I do is I start with screens. I'm a more visual sort of person. I need to see that which I'm building, and then I can, once I see the screen, then I can come about um, building what I want to do. So let's get started. And what I want to do on this is I'm going to go ahead and create a project. Let's see. I believe no, that's video junk. Well, we'll just start with a fresh browser here. We can jump there, I think would be a good place to start. From there, I can back up to Pure Basic projects. Um, let's see, what we have is what did I call this? Beginner's Corner, right? Beginner's Corner. There we go. So the idea here is beginners. Oh, look, I even have a folder. Okay, so the intro, and there we go. All right, cool. Let's back up to here and say, okay, let's create our first project. So I'm going to create a folder here, and we will say first project, or how about start? Okay, there's our project start. So it's got its own folder now. We can open our folder up, and there we are. So let's come over here and let's put in a block of comments at the top of our code. And everybody, I mean, you don't have to do this. We'll come down here and say, okay, there's our block of comments. And we can say, what is our goal here? Get started. Okay, so there we go. Now let's save our project. File, save as. And this is probably going to end up, oh, look, not too far away. So let's come down here to Beginner's Corner and start. Okay, and we will say, why not? Start.pb. That is a kind of a tradition I have. And I want to point out things that I do as a matter of course that may not be obvious. So when I start a new project, the first thing I do is create a folder by the name of the project, and then I create the first code sheet in there, and it has the same name as the folder name, which is the project name. So you don't want all these being different. And the reason for that is, and let me show you this, after 8 years, and I've done lots of cleaning up, I want you to take a look, see at how many different folders I have out here on my PureBasic projects folder. All right, there's hundreds of them. Okay, I've got tons and tons and tons and tons of projects depending on what I've done. And if you don't have a consistent naming structure, then boy, you will never remember what the name. You'll remember the code sheet name, and then you won't remember, well, what folder is that code sheet in? This is the so come up with an. It doesn't matter what it is. Just come up with a naming structure that makes sense to you. And when things have importance or reasoning behind them, I'll point that out and say, okay, this is how I do it. This is how maybe Class Builder expects things to be. But it's all a matter of good practices when you write code. You need to have your own level of standards that you want to follow, and these are your standards. So, dadgummit, follow your standards, whatever they happen to be. This is one of mine. The first code sheet here will always be the name of the folder here. Uh, Very, very rarely do I ever change that. I've been sorry every time I did. So, enough harping on that. Okay, so once we have our project folder, once we have our first code sheet, now it's time to create a project. So let's come back over here and say, okay, project, we're going to create a new project. Now, our project, well, let's see. I think this is going to be start because that's the name of the doggone thing. And you can say my first, first starting project. And then you can come down here if you want and say blah, blah, blah. Okay, if you want to get that big into that. I don't normally do that. Okay, so once we have this, we need to come over and say, where are we going to put it? Okay, so we have start. And of course, he's going to come up with, wow, hey, he came up with my C drive of all things. We're not even on the C drive. We're on the deep. Where are you going? Okay, so let's just use the tree here and back up. So let's close down this. Uh-oh, don't go to pictures. Well, you never know where some things are going to go. All right, there we go. So D drive, and we're in development, and we're in PureBasic, and then we're also in the beginner's corner, and we're in our start folder. Okay, so if you noticed, he remembered that I put start as the name, and he's going to fill in for me the PBP. So all I have to do is hit save. So now we have a project. And now what you need to do is add folders or well, you can add folders, but you need to add the files that make up your project. So you can have a lot of files in that start folder, and only some of them are part of the project. So um, first, he comes up with, he must like Adventure Quest too. He comes up with that an awful lot with me. I probably said, remember this project or something somewhere, but I'll be honest, I don't remember. So let's come on over here to our beginner's corner. I just saw it a second ago. Beginner's corner, and let's go to start, and we can add our start. Now, you can't double click. You have to hit the add. And then he's got all these options down here. Um, Now you have this one that I've left off, and this is saying whenever I open this project, always open this file. And okay, I'm not fond of that, so I leave that one off. But I want him to scan these files for autocomplete. That's your type ahead stuff when you start typing, and then show it in the project pane. Absolutely, and warning if it's changed. So if it gets changed outside of the IDE, you'll see this sometimes when you use Class Builder. If class, you go in and change a class and he'll get all upset and say, "Hey, this file's changed and it didn't come from me. It got updated from Class Builder." So you just kind of say, "Oh, okay, that's fine, thanks." So once we've got that, we can hit create, and he'll go do his thing, and then he's going to show us our project here. So this is our project. We have one program in it. Now we really should come over to compiler options here. You don't have to, but you really should, because the minute you go to run your code, he's going to get all bent out of shape, because for this project, he has no idea what source you want to start off with. So think of this as a huge pyramid, and this is that pinnacle top little block of granite or whatever they made pyramids out of. Uh, this is that very first sheet of code where everything cascades below him. He's the guy that is the begin all of your project. So for us, obviously, you should know this answer. It's going to be start. Okay. So we come out and we select start, and he says, okay, when you say run, I'm going to run this program. Now, if you want to create an executable, then you can simply say start.exe. Now, you might think that output executable would assume that the name is going to be exe. It does not. You have to tell it what you want and be case specific. If I said exe, then that uh, when I compile this, it's going to be an uppercase exe. If I, came in here and said exe, it's going to be a lowercase ex capital E. So the tradition in the world is just all lowercase exe. Now, if you can leave it in the actual project folder, which is by default where he's going to build him, okay? Um, or you can choose a different folder, and I'll show you reasons for doing that later. So if we get this series far enough, I'll show you how to build an install for your applications, and you may actually opt to build your executable into the installation folders. That way, all you then have to do is run your installation script to generate the install, and you got all your fresh build stuff there. So other options that are things to think about. Do you want to specify a compiler? Now, if you remember back to the previous videos, I have set up multiple compilers out here for me to choose from, and that's in the preferences. You can go default and go create other versions of PureBasic to actually compile this with. Or you can take the default, which is the IDE version of what you're doing. You don't need to select it. Now, you'll get in trouble, or not in trouble, you'll have an error pop if you actually say I'm use 6.2 64-bit, and then you bring your code over to some other computer and they might be on 6.13 or 15 or something like that. Then when you go to compile your program, he's going to kick up an error at you and say, hey, this project says it needs to be on 6.2 and you're not running 6.2. So I'm not building it until you fix this problem. So the only reason to say this is if you really specifically mean this or not. Now, what I also want to point out here is that we are configuring on this tab this target, okay? This is the default target that gets created. You might want to come over here and say, hey, this is going to be start. Okay, so now we have a start as a compiled target that we want to build that matches this. If you have a program like in the war game, you'll see I have 3 different targets that we build out of the same code. And I just mix and match what I bring into the actual uh, source input source file, the pinnacle guy here, the top of our pyramid. I'll have one for the creator, one for the player, and one for the server. So I'll have 3 different options over here as to what to build. Now, you don't always have to build EXEs. You could build DLLs and other things down here, but that's kind of out of scope for this. That's more of an advanced feature that if you're starting out, just know it's there and don't give it another thought. Optimizing your code, that is a default for me from the get-go. I always optimize the code. Uh, Not everything is DPI aware. So like for instance, the data grids, you'll find that the data grid is not DPI aware. And so you can't, if you enable DPI aware, he's going to modify the size of everything based on your operating system settings to say, hey, make everything 125% larger than what it really is, okay? So 100% is just normal size. So it automatically blows things up for people who need to see things bigger. And but be aware it's there. If you need it, great. If you don't need it, then don't do it. So the biggie for me is optimized generated code. Now, using icons. Do you want, when you run a program, you get an icon in the icon tray at the bottom of your screen, right? It comes up as a little tab down there and it's got a cutesy little picture on it. So do you want to specify what that looks like, or do you not? Okay, so you can use the default, which will just be an application kind of icon, and or you can choose whatever you want to put in there, but it has to be an ICO file. And that in and of itself is somewhat problematic. And again, I hate to say I'll get to it, but I will, but that's where IrfanView comes in, and I'll show you that later. Okay, so that really finishes our project. However, there are more options that you can set. You can turn on various options and warning levels and all of this. Personally, I just kind of leave that alone. Constants, I love. So constants is where you get your build count and your executable creation values. You know how you get a version of a program that's build 1.3.27.2700 or something? That's here. So we can come in and build our own custom constants. And again, I will show you how to do that when we get there. But this is where that is done. And then they have version info. You can fill out all your name stuff, and you can actually fill out all the stuff that shows up on Microsoft or on the operating system when they right click and go to versions. I don't mess with that. Resources? To be honest, I've never used this. I suppose I probably should. I'm sure there's, I'll actually research that. But for now, we'll just come back to it. Never really even noticed resources over there. I don't know. I guess I got tunnel vision. Okay, so we've created our project here. Okay, so now let's come back over to our code and let's do the all famous important debug. Let's see, and we will say Hello World. Okay, the classic very first program that everybody in the world writes. And then take a look at the toolbar. You see the green bug, right? The green bug. Actually, when they say that there's a bug in the code, that actually goes back to a real happening. The very first computers that were being built, they had it. They actually had a cockroach climb into the computer, and evidently he was quick fried to a crackly crunch, and basically crashed the computer inside the computer case. And when they opened the case up, they found their roach and pulled it out. The what are they called? Palmetto bugs or whatever you want to call them. And they actually physically had a bug in their hardware. Ha ha ha. So having a bug in your code actually goes back to a real life happening. So let's come up here, and this is our debugger. We have a green bug up there. Um, so leave him on. If I do that and it's not selected, then it's off. And you don't want that. You get no messages whatsoever. So we leave that on, and let's go ahead and we'll compile and run our code. And let's see what we get. And boy, that took a long time. I guess he's just running it for the first time. So here we go. We got a hello world on a debug screen. Now, if I turn the debugger off, what do you think we're going to get? You're going to get absolutely nothing because that's a debug and we have debug off. So we can rectify that and come down here and say message requester, and then you have a title, and then you have text, and then you have well, let's just show you. This is, I'm not sure what you would call this. So these are enumerations of message requester errors. You can actually say this is an info. Okay, so let's do that. And uh, we can say hi as our title, and then we can say hello world. Okay, now I'm going to leave debug on and hit play. So now we're going to get our debug window and we're going to get a pop-up window at us. Okay, so there's our debug window, and there's our actual message requester that we configured. Oh, and look, I spelled hello wrong. Isn't that awesome? Let's try that and do it again just because, spell check was invented by people like me, programmers who none of us can spell. I've decided that. So anyhow, if you notice, we have hi up here as our title, and then we have hello world, which is our body of our message, and then we have this is this little info over here. That's what he's telling us here. If I came in and said that this was error, now we're going to get a beep and we're going to get all kinds of stuff that's going to be mad at us because of this. It's a slap you in the face and say you did something wrong, but our message still says hi and hello world. So this little parameter out here controls the picture. So there is our very first video or first program in the tradition of all languages. Writing hello world is the first and foremost that everybody does, and that gives you a full rundown on projects. So thanks for your time, folks, and we'll get together again real soon.